Justin Jefferson is on IR with a hamstring injury. He'll miss at least 4 games. So what does the Vikings offense do in the interim? Let's break down their options on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that? 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it?
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to those of you who do listen to this show every single day. For those who are new, my name is Luke Braun. I will be your host. You can find this show anywhere you find all of your favorite podcasts, anywhere that aggregates fine audio content, including the SiriusXM app, where you can also catch live broadcasts of all of the games with all sorts of trials and packages. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Not so fun news to bring to you. If you missed it, the Vikings have placed Justin Jefferson, or are expected to place Justin Jefferson on injured reserve this week. That means he will miss at least the next 4 games. The vibe feels like it's got a good chance of being more than that, though. That could be kind of in the 5 to 7 range. It doesn't feel like it's this is a season-ending injury kind of thing, but it does feel like he'll miss a pretty significant chunk of the season. So the Vikings offense has to adapt and become its next thing. The instant question is, what do the Vikings do? And I guess the first thing is, how do you deal with the injury itself, which there's all kinds of speculation going on about. I won't speculate as to these, like what grade or strain it is or anything like that. I don't have sources on that. So you'll have to go elsewhere for that kind of speculation. But what I will say is it behooves the Vikings to be very cautious, right? Because if you aggravate this, rush him back, right? Try to make something, in a desperation attempt at saving the dead season and rush him back. And then that causes a new injury that hampers his contract negotiation. That could lead to a sequence of events where you don't even get a contract done, right? Thinking of Danielle Hunter when he was trying to negotiate a contract, but the whole thing was, back in 2021, but he's got this injury and we don't know how bad it is. So with a hamstring that hopefully he'll be back and playing before season's end, that can be in the rearview mirror and we don't really have to think about it in a contract negotiation. But if you rush him back and then he's favoring a leg wrong and he tears his ACL, you don't want that to happen, right? So caution appears to be the name of the game. Adam Schefter speculated that perhaps this is wild. I hate it. I have an issue with somebody like Schefter whose word is gospel around NFL circles, tweeting something like this, that Jefferson would sandbag it and drag out the hamstring injury as a way of expressing dissatisfaction with his contract. Here's the deal. If Schefter is saying that, he doesn't provide opinions, right? He is not a guy that opines. He is a guy that parrots what agents tell him. There's a long track record of agents basically writing tweets for Adam Schefter, sometimes literally. So that probably is some kind of negotiation tactic. Just, I don't know, trying to publicly remind the Vikings, hey, this thing is still on the table here. I still think the plan is revisited after the season, and we'll see where contract extensions go from there, or contract talks go from there. I think just about every fan base in the league wants to trade their team to trade for Justin Jefferson because he's the best receiver in the league, of course. Why wouldn't you? So if you are from another fan base coming to listen, here's what I have to say. It's not happening. Sorry to dash your dreams. Sorry to be the wet blanket living in reality. But somebody's got to be the adult in the room because I've seen some wacky things. Justin Jefferson wants to be in Minnesota. He likes Kirk Cousins. He's also fine, kind of feels pretty at peace with it if it's not Kirk Cousins. He has a good relationship with Kevin O'Connell. He has a good relationship with Kwesi. He likes it in Minnesota and he wants to sign an extension. The Vikings love Justin Jefferson, and the only way to pry Justin Jefferson away from the Vikings would be some kind of Godfather package that sets them up for a quarterback. And even that, you probably would have to like really set them up with a quarterback or give them your quarterback. There's also a lot that I've seen out there, especially from like national media, about the Vikings like becoming a fire sale team. And I think it's very NBA analysis. The trade deadline is always a massive disappointment in the NFL because we hype up all these situations where teams could be just like selling the whole thing for parts at the end. And we'll like maybe get one team in a given year that does it. Whereas, in the NBA, the trade deadline comes a lot later in the season. So you've got teams that are like the NFL equivalent of, 3-8, and it's like deep in, it's after Thanksgiving, and they go, yeah, well, we're already like basically eliminated. So yeah, let's try to set up for next year. The trade deadline is Halloween. It's in 3 weeks. The Vikings could lose all of the next 3 games and still not really feel like they're being sellers at the deadline and still feel like, well, we've still got a decent core. Let's try to build up instead of tearing down. I tweeted a clip from the summer of Kwesi kind of answering this question and essentially saying like, we are not trying to tear this down. He's not trying to tear this down. He's trying to shapeshift on the fly while still focusing on the year that is in front of them. And agree or disagree with that strategy, but that's very clearly that's the competitive rebuild strategy. He's been pretty clear about that. I don't think that there's an excuse for being confused about that anymore. He's been pretty explicit about what that strategy is. And if you're still confused about it, go watch that clip. He just tells it to you. Anyways, I digress. The Vikings aren't trading Kirk Cousins. They're not trading Justin Jefferson before the deadline. And when the deadline actually does pass, I'll be very relieved because then I won't get completely asinine trade offers in my DMs about like Daniel Hunter and Kirk Cousins for a 3rd round pick and like cap space or whatever. It's some crazy stuff people shoot over. But the real question now is, what do we do? The Vikings still have games to play, whether you like it or not. And they are going to look at this and say, all right, we have to find a way to make this offense work without Justin Jefferson now, right? Their attitude is not going to be, oh, well, it's over. Okay. They're not going to hang their heads and sulk and then decide that they're going to lose a bunch of games. They're not going to start saying, yeah, but Caleb Williams, they won't. You can. They won't. It's not how they're wired. The goal is going to be, this is now a challenge we are presented with. How do we deal with it? What are we going to try? So let's try to play the game alongside them. What should we, what do we have here? And in TJ Hockenson and Jordan Addison, the offense is going to flow through those 2 guys now. So let's talk about a little bit what we have in those guys and what the Vikings can do, not to mention the run game, what the Vikings can do to still have a functional offense going up against a Bears team that's given up some pretty bad defensive performances last year or this year. How can the Vikings go into Soldier Field without Justin Jefferson and actually get a W? That ain't impossible. Let's figure out a way. So that's going to be what the rest of the show is. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're preparing for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. And how about some quarterbacks that are perhaps worth taking a look as trade targets, especially if you're somebody who is relying on, say, Anthony Richardson, who's got an AC joint sprain, or other hurt quarterbacks around the league. What about Trevor Lawrence? So he has had something of a slow fantasy start. He's only gotten multiple touchdowns once in the first 5 weeks. That came week 1, so he's been in a bunch of slumps. But there's still all these weapons, Calvin Ridley, Evan Engram, Christian Kirk, that Lawrence can use, and the Jaguars can put together some more explosive offense. They absolutely have the opportunity to do so, but there might be a buy low opportunity here so that you can slot Trevor Lawrence in right where he fits. And eBay Motors understands that it is all about which players are good fits where. And it's the same thing with your vehicle. They've got over 122 million parts for your car that can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly, whether it's a brake kits or something fancy like LED headlights or bumpers or stuff that's a little bit more under the hood, whatever your car needs, eBay Motors has available. And they have a system where you can make sure that it fits your car properly the first time. So you don't have to go navigate the jungle of which part's compatible with this year, but not this year of this make, all that crap. No, eBay Motors can do all of that for you and give you that guaranteed fit or your money back. It is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time. Plus, at these prices, you can't say no to it. So go to ebaymotors.com. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you're a watcher of Locked On Vikings on YouTube, you may have noticed that the Locked On Vikings YouTube channel has Locked On NFL Kickoff live every Sunday morning. It is a live show where the Locked On hosts get together and talk about the upcoming games of that Sunday, something that you might want to check out if you haven't already. But if you are subscribed on YouTube, which you should be, please, thank you. You will see that show up when it comes, and that is something that the Locked On Network is doing. Really fun endeavor. Let's move on. I would like to talk about, I think the three main things that now comprise the offense, right? Three prongs of the offense, which are Jordan Addison plays, TJ Hockenson plays, and then I'll just kind of say generically the run game is the third part. It's probably going to be most of the offense. Yeah, you'll get throws to KJ Osborne and throws to Brandon Powell or Johnny Munt or whatever, keepers and all these kind of other schemey things. But really, we're talking about focal points of the offense. And let me, I guess, start with the run game, which has been pretty good. And I think the offensive line deserves a lot of praise. We have spent a decade lambasting offensive lines, questioning how can this possibly be this bad, saying it can't possibly get worse right before it gets worse. We've been real critical. I've been horribly critical of the offensive line, right? They deserve their props when they have two good games in a row. And they had two fantastic games in a row. The whole unit. This is working right now. Got to sustain it, right? But for now, this is working really, really, really well. That goes for the run game as well. The combo blocks have been just beautiful, textbook combo blocks, and they've had good punch and good drive. The Alexander Madison, Cam Akers kind of double punch thing seems to be working better than when it was just Madison and like maybe a couple drives of Ty Chandler. Cam Akers, I think he earned more than a couple drives in the Kansas City game, if I recall. And maybe that'll continue to go up, but either way, the sort of punch counterpunch, the thunder lightning of it is working. The Vikings have been able to run the ball the last 2 weeks, and I think they'll have to really, really lean on that against the Bears and beyond to keep things ahead of the sticks and not be in so many third and longs. One of the things that really characterized the Vikings last year was that they were in third and long a ton, and they got out of it a ton. And that's a really, really difficult thing to do sustainably. They converted a lot of 3rd and 10s. That's kind of the JJ thing, though. And you don't have your best weapon now for those 3rd and 10s. So these have to be 3rd and 4s where you can run stick to Addison and Hockenson, or 3rd and 1s where you can run the ball. You have to get some, right? And stay ahead of the chains. That's where the run game can really be helpful. And of course, the play action of it all too. That's part of it. But I really want to talk about the two guys, Jordan Addison and TJ Hockenson. Those two guys are where the offense will live now, for better or worse. Maybe you don't think that's good enough, and maybe it won't be good enough, and they'll lose the games. But if they lose, they will lose through those two guys. And if they win, they will win through those two guys. And I think about like who is the first guy in the progression, right? Where do you put the important pieces? And when it was Justin Jefferson, a lot of times Justin Jefferson would run alerts, and those alerts would be something like, hey, pre-snap, check if you're getting singled up, man-to-man indicators. If you get man indicators, you might have single coverage on Justin Jefferson. He's running a go route, throw it. And, nothing else in the play call matters. That's what the alerts are. And you'll see Justin Jefferson get those go balls on that sometimes when you see, it's single high. That means we got man-to-man. I'm throwing this ball to JJ. That's not Jordan Addison's game. He's not a fade route contested catch kind of guy, right? He's a deep threat for sure. running, he's a post maven, or, basics over the middle, that kind of thing. He is a chew up space and manipulate a cornerback before the break kind of guy, really set up and knock him down kind of route runner. And I think putting him in those situations is vital to getting the explosiveness that the Vikings have enjoyed so far. They have the most explosive deep passing game in the league, by 20+ yard passes. A lot of that's JJ. So we have to replace that and keep that explosiveness, especially if we live in a world where we put ourselves in a 2-score hole at the beginning of every game because we can't stop fumbling, right? That is more vital than ever, and it's boring, so I'm not mentioning it as much anymore. I don't think it makes for good content, but that makes it no less true that the Vikings would be 5-0 if they didn't fumble. Like, if they could stop fumbling, they would be 5-0, and that's, yeah, of course, the team would be good if you took away the thing that they were worst at. That is the thing that they are worst at, and it's the thing that's having by far, the most impact on them, right? Or I guess 4-1. I don't think you could give them the Chiefs game because the fumble gave them a touchdown, but also that the defense could have got a stop, so that could have been a field goal, and then even still, that just would have tied it. So 4-1, we'll say. But still, we would be in a totally different world here if the team stopped fumbling, right? Which tells you, hey, look, the amount of talent, we were okay. We were doing okay. Schematically, these things are on the right track. They just couldn't stop fumbling. But that is no longer true because we no longer have the superstar. So we still have to rethink how we do that. And if we cannot rely on ball security and not putting ourselves in a hole early, which I don't think we can't trust that, right? You need the explosiveness. And so setting up Jordan Addison for explosiveness is, I don't think putting him in the top of the read like Justin Jefferson would be. I kind of think that this is a world where maybe he is the one running the alert corner on choice. But I think that's something you give to KJ Osborne too. And you go, all right, well, if they bust the coverage, KJ Osborne can punish, he can deal with that. But what I want is, if we're going to have a quick first option like choice or return or a slant, I want that to be TJ Hockenson. I think he's good for that. And especially coming from in line and perhaps you're blocking, right? And for the longer developing stuff that happens behind it, that's where we go to Jordan Addison. Because ultimately, Jordan Addison, at his core, as a person, is a playmaker. It is his identity as a guy. And it goes all the way back to Pitt in high school. He's ESPN Jordan on Twitter, right? That's his handle. He wants to be that guy, right? And you can see it in the way he plays. Like, he catches that, I think it was a drag on Sunday against the Chiefs, and spinning away from guys and trying to make the coolest play in the world is who he is. So to set that up, I want to give him opportunities with the ball in the second level and see if he can't juke out a safety and go turn it into something special. That means basics over the middle. That means post routes. That means longer developing stuff that might be later in the progression. I think the real key here, and he's a guy that's been getting a lot of flack, and I don't think it's fair at all, is TJ Hockenson. I talked about him a little bit on yesterday's show with the Twitter Tuesday stuff because people were asking, but I have a whole big long Patreon thing that should be out by the time you listen to this. And also, I am going to explain what I mean by this here, but this offense does not function without TJ Hockenson. It doesn't, it's going to have to morph without Jefferson too, but TJ Hockenson is a pillar. He is a corner. He's a linchpin. He is a fulcrum of the offense. He is the thing it is built around in a way that is really uniquely only capable of him. You cannot put Johnny Munt in those situations and do the same thing. Let me explain myself about that in a bit. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical, and in particular, their Jase case, which provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. Look, we live in a world where times have been unprecedented for quite a long time. We've got all kinds of climate disasters, pandemics, supply chain issues, all kinds of stuff, which means you have to be prepared now more than ever, because guess what? Accidents in the home or other kinds of things that could potentially injure you or other sinus infection or whatever, they're not going to wait for the supply chain issues over in China. That's what the Jase case is for. Empower yourself to help yourself out in an emergency and be prepared for the unexpected, right? All you have to do to get it is go online, fill out a form, and then you can get a prescription. You might have to jump on a phone call with a board-certified physician, and life-saving medications will go right to your door. And if nothing else, it can give you peace of mind, so you know that you're protected in certain events, even if there's a horrible storm and you can't get out to a pharmacy. Get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. I got a take for you. It's maybe spicy. I think the Vikings lose by 3 scores to the Chiefs if they do not have TJ Hockenson in that game. I think he had that much of an impact on the game. And maybe if he made those contested catches that everybody's mad at him for, maybe the Vikings win. But if it weren't for his impact, they are not close. I cannot overstate the impact that TJ Hockenson has on this offense. And what I talked about yesterday on this, I want to follow it up because a lot of the YouTube comments got very mad at me. So let me kind of respond to the sentiment, which a lot of the sentiment was just like, what are you talking about? TJ's bad. So reiterate, you are probably thinking of 3 particular reps where he had 3 difficult catches. He didn't bring any of them in. You got to bring them in. Some of them could have been better throws, but you still got to bring them in. Fair enough, right? Notch those as bad reps and then look at all the rest of them. But I said, you kind of got to look holistically. You have to look at everything else he does. So I did that. You can go to patreon.com/LukeBrunnNFL and find that. And I showed my work on that one, right? I think I have like 20 reps in there of the ones that he does. It's like half his whole game broken down. And there's all kinds of things, right? They will ask TJ Hockenson to one-on-one a defensive end and hold up for a long time. This isn't some backside. All you got to do is close the curtain or take him where he wants to go, kind of easy peasy stuff that other teams give to their tight ends when they're mismatched. No, we say, hey man, you're on Mike Dana. Good luck. You're going to block Mike Dana for a long time. And guess what? That was a touchdown pass to Addison. He was a key block on that right in front of Kirk's face on an edge rusher, one-on-one, no help. There are other times where he will delay release and then run a deep route or a double move. He delay released into stick nod once. To me, that is not something anybody else gets to ask their tight end to do. And the dividends of that are that you can basically guarantee a horrific matchup. You can put that dude on a linebacker. They'll run choice with him on a linebacker, and he dusts linebackers in the route. Oh my goodness, they're nasty routes. Absolutely kill linebackers and get open, right? Now, did Kirk throw that time? No, he had something else he was doing with the ball, and it was totally fine because the progression was elsewhere. But if we're evaluating the player and the value that we get out of him and talking about, did we get enough of the contract, we have to be happy with a lot of these reps. But what you can really get when you can delay block and then run a deep route, right, which he does all the time, is you can have the same guy affecting the protection and the deep part of the field. You realize the stress that puts on the defense. Because if he's part of the protection, that means the offensive line doesn't have to account for, say, a nickel blitzer sometimes. And it can totally ruin their whole blitz. Just by, stopping him up for just a little bit of time too, right? He doesn't have to be fully part of the protection. And because he's fast enough to get downfield on something like stick nod, the defense's coverage has to have declared by the time that delayed block is over. By the time he releases off of that block, the coverage is totally declared. So there's no disguising. There's no more trickery. You know exactly who he's going to run that route against. And it's really hard for them to say, put their cornerback that's good at contested catches on the tight end, right? Or put their mismatch nightmare eraser safety, their J-Ron Cursor, where for us, it's like, I guess it's Cam Bynum for us. Cam Bynum was like the Travis Kelce guy, and he did all right, man. This Bynum season is something else. But they don't get to do that when he stops in the protection. You say, oh, my guy's blocking. I go out to the, whatever my zone responsibility is, or you kind of move on to the next thing in your coverage. And then when he releases, he can run a route that stresses those coverages that have already gone to their kind of basic zone components. You have to be good at blocking, fast, and good at route running You have to be all three of those things to do this. We are not going to get this from Chicago from Cole Kmet. Like, he's not doing that, right? Adam Troutman ain't doing this. TJ Hockenson is doing this. And I'm sorry, Lions fans, Sam Laporta does not do that in the Lions offense. He's got a couple of really fun, explosive plays on busted coverages, and congratulations to you for it. But TJ Hockenson is doing stuff for the Vikings offense that has value that is not going to be captured by stats. And this is what drives me insane about especially the fantasy community. Somebody sent me a tweet from a fantasy guy that's like, here are his fantasy points per game versus like Sam Laporta's. It's like, hey, I do not care about fantasy. All right. I'm not very good at fantasy, and this is not a fantasy football podcast. But it also only credits a tight end for plays where they touch the ball. And that's just such a bad way to evaluate that position in particular. Tight ends are there because of versatility. That position needs to be judged by how many different things you do. This is why Mike Gesicki isn't the greatest tight end in the world, even though he's a pretty good receiving tight end, pretty good fantasy tight end. But because he's not useful in blocking and he's not as versatile as other tight ends in the world, as other tight ends in the league, this is why he didn't get the value on the market that he maybe thought he was getting when he signed with New England, right? This is why Miami couldn't offload him at the trade deadline for fantastic trade value. You know what I mean? Tight end value is based on versatility, because the more you can do with your tight end, the more you can do, and the defense doesn't know what you're doing, right? Because if Hockenson can block, and boy, there are some nasty run blocks in this one, and there are some nasty pass blocks, and there are some nasty routes. And if he can do all three of those things, he's not a tell, right? You have to respect all of it. There was a time when TJ Hockenson, all he did was take a jab step inside, and he got the edge rusher to cut inside with him, worried about either a slant or a little shallow cross or something like that, which they run a lot with him. And then he was able to go back outside. He almost was like releasing like it was a route, but it was a run block on a jet sweep. It was the jet sweep to Brandon Powell, the first one. Just that little jab step. And because he's good enough at running routes, that linebacker had to go with him, and that linebacker stepped inside, and it was now too far inside to have any prayer of making a play on the jet sweep. And Hockenson could then release upfield and block another guy. So one jab step, you take care of a guy, and then you take care of a second guy with your block. 2 for 1, TJ Hockenson. How many cap dollars is the 2 for 1 worth? So without Justin Jefferson, all of this becomes even more important. Just him on stick on 3rd and 4, choice on 3rd and 4, which is a Vikings go-to. All of that is so much more important. Addison is so much more important. Every little mistake that any of those guys makes is going to be amplified. So it's important. Like, not fumbling is now life or death, where before it was just kind of this annoying habit and they could almost dig themselves out of it beforehand. And I'm probably way underselling it, because believe it or not, it's more important than it used to be. You got to hold on to the ball. You have to run your routes right. And yeah, TJ Hockenson has to catch those contested catches. He's got to do that. That is a negative on his evaluation. It's just that he does so much else. I think that it kind of comes out in the wash. Tomorrow, we'll talk to Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears, and we'll kind of start focusing on the Bears and how the Vikings can attack them, especially without JJ. So we'll have to sort of shift our focus there. I know it's a huge bummer. You know, he's everybody's favorite, but the show must go on. The games get played. Whether or not you think the Vikings can win them, they're going to go play them. So batten down the hatches and either nut up or shut up. It's time to play some football games. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.